we got
in this fellowship time to answer any or all questions about God, religion, or the Bible.
You're watching the Atheist Experience, brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin, with your host, Ray Blevins, and our very special guest, Rohan Wynar.
Thank you, and good morning, Austin, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. And if you're, whoops, look, we are live. This is November 1st. We'll be taking your phone calls here on the air if you want, but we'll get to that later. I just want to remind everybody that this is live and it's November 1st. I hope you all survived Halloween last night, and I had a great time. As usual, I'd like to do announcements of the group. We meet every Sunday down at the Hot Jumble Bakeries where we normally meet, except for the first Sunday of every month, and that's where we have our guest lecture series at Furs North Cross Mall. It's free and open to the public, and that the restaurant opens at 11. We try to get the lecture started at 11:30, and today's guest is Rohan Wynar, and he will also be at Furs. So if there's any questions that you don't get to today on the show, you can come down there and ask him in person. He does a really great presentation there. There's more to it than what we're just going to do. A little bit of questions and answers here today on the show, but you actually brought slides and everything else.
Yeah, it should be a fun talk today. I really want to thank you, by the way, for letting me come down here. This is one of my favorite subjects, and it's one of the subjects that I like to remind people that it actually affects everybody. It's the subject of exotic beliefs and cult beliefs, and defining what these beliefs are, or coming up with some kind of way of defining a cult belief versus a mainstream religious position, and how to distinguish what might be dangerous cult belief and why we would think it's dangerous, yes, and why not. And there's a lot of very great questions. There's constitutional questions, there's philosophical questions, there's questions of forensic legal questions, and it's a very exciting subject, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say about it, and I think we'll have a fun time discussing it today.
Why don't you just fill in the audience there? Why don't you give us your, I was trying to get your bibliography, that's well, not the correct, but your resume, I guess.
Well, you know, why? Yeah, that's a good question. Why am I qualified to talk about beliefs in cults? Actually, it's such a huge subject that expertise on this kind of thing is really hard. You would literally have to be a full-time professional specialist, as a lot of people are, to really cover the whole gambit. But what I do is I study physics at the University of Texas, and I'm working toward my PhD. And as during this time, while at the university, it's very obvious when people are running around making anti-scientific claims and statements. Yes. And not all cults do this, but many do, and those are the ones that I find particularly interesting. And those are the ones I'm going to focus on a little bit.
Well, let's dive right into it. Is there any particularly here in Austin?
Oh yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, most cult organizations do make some kind of pseudoscientific claim, and there's plenty of them here. There's I'll talk about these this afternoon. There's the Sri Chinmoy organization, which is one of my favorites in this regard. There's, of course, the Church of Scientology, which is got to be the most blatant, obvious, and just gross violator of fundamental science that I've ever run across in my short life here. They got
that big, wonderful building there on Guadalupe.
That's right, and every day they're in your face, and I feel like the definition, we'll try and cover what the definition of a pseudoscientific cult organization is a little later, but they certainly meet this definition in the broadest scope of the word. They meet everybody's definition. And everybody who tries to define what a cult is always seems to include Scientology. Then there are those people who define cults in such a way that they only include, say, deviant Christian organizations. And then there's people who define cults that basically include everybody, including the Catholic Church. And then there's people that will define cults so broadly that the Marine Corps would be part of a cult. So it's really interesting to weave your way through what these definitions are and come to some conclusion yourself of what I'm going to consider a cult. Am I going to consider the Catholic Church a cult? Am I going to consider the Mormons a cult? And certainly there are lots of Christian organizations that do consider the Mormons a cult organization.
And the
Jehovah's Witnesses is a borderline in my case because they do make pseudoscientific claims. Yet they make very, and they're very dire. They're very dire pseudoscientific. They're the most dangerous pseudoscientific claims around. Like Scientology makes some pretty wacky ones. But you can work with their pseudoscientific claims and live a healthy life. If you accept the Jehovah's Witness pseudoscientific claims, especially regarding, of course, blood transfusions and healing, you are putting your life in jeopardy. You basically are. And there's no reason to do that. It's absurd. And people have died because of that.
Yes.
And that's a real shock. So we'll try to cover most of those today at the lecture. And
just remind everybody that's at the North Cross Mall when we leave here. This is live November 1st, and we will be at North Cross Mall here in a couple hours. Go ahead, I interrupted you. I just wanted to remind everyone.
Yeah, and so one of the first things we'll tackle with, and hopefully we'll have somewhat of a dialogue, but ultimately what we'll discover is that you can go through a laundry list of warning signs that involve charismatic leaders, involve certain kinds of devotion, involve the rate at which information about the organization gets disseminated to new people. A typical characteristic of most occultic organizations are that when you join or when you enter your gateway, you get this much information about the cult. And then as you stay, you get another piece. And then as you stay, you get another piece. And if you were given it all at once up front, you would literally laugh and walk away.
Yes.
You would literally laugh at them in their face, say, you guys are the dumbest people I've ever been exposed to, and walk away. And they know that, so they don't do that. They don't give you, even if you ask specific questions, you don't get the answers until you stay longer and longer and longer. And this is a very, very important aspect of cults. Now notice that this is not, so here's one way, if you want to use that as an operating part of your definition, this is one way to eliminate the Catholic Church. Right? You can walk into the Catholic Church and you can get every piece of information about Catholicism on the day you step foot into the church. So they don't do this. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not by any other definition of cult, but they certainly don't satisfy this definition. And I think this is a very powerful aspect of the definition.
And not to interrupt you, I see the lights going on. We have phone callers, and I think they're actually on the air. Is there a phone caller on the air? Because the light's on. I'm sorry.
Hello?
Hello, caller.
Hey.
Good morning.
Oh, we lost our caller.
Yeah, they usually go through the screener to get to us before, so that's not the normal procedure. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I'm sorry.
Well, the notion is basically that that's one aspect of defining a cult, is how much and how quickly information comes out. And you can talk about that aspect quite in detail. Of course, Scientology is the classic form of this, where not only does little chunks come out, but they go so far as to say that once you learn a chunk, you're really not allowed to talk about it with other cult members. This is what L. Ron Hubbard called verbal tech. If you talk about the doctrines too much, well, you'll distort and twist them. When in reality what would happen is the more you talked about them, the more chance you would have to realize that they are absolutely inane. And not only do you get little pieces at a time, but you also get, hold on, caller, 1 second, but you also get, you have to pay for them extremely. Caller, are you there?
Oh,
I see.
Our call screeners will get this worked out. Sorry about the caller. Okay. This is live November 1st. We're getting a little bugs on the phone.
See it here, it's not there.
I know, that's what, no, we heard them on the monitor. Sorry, Keith, the floor manager.
Yeah, and the call screening is not real, it's just very basic screening.
Yes, they'll get your name and get us on the air. But why don't you go ahead and give out your definition for...
Well, my definition, again, is not a typical one, but I want everybody to understand where it's come from.
Okay.
I'm looking for any organization that makes claims that are blatantly anti-scientific or non-scientific, that are also falsifiable. So I'm looking for somebody that says, hey, if you practice our religion, you will be able to execute the telepathy. Right? You'll be able to start telepathically communicating. You'll be able to levitate. If you practice our religion, you'll be a lot healthier than those who don't. If you practice our cultic religion, you'll be able to be immortal is a typical claim, or claims like our religion's best because our leader can do amazing things. Our leader has telepathic powers. Our leader can materialize objects from thin air. Our leader
talks to aliens.
Or channels aliens. Those are the cults that interest me the most. And not all cults do this, but the ones that I really consider cultic are those. And it gives me a good foundation, because it's very difficult. It's always easy to mix words and argue about, well, was the Marine Corps a cult or not, or is the Catholic Church a cult or not? But I could easily point to aspects that, or I can easily say, yes, this organization is a cult because of the following claims. For example, the Russian Orthodox Church. Here's a great,
Okay.
I don't know how many people have been exposed to the Russian Orthodox Church, but these people aren't called Byzantine for nothing, right? They are extremely, extremely ritualistic, extremely embedded in orthodoxy, Christian orthodoxy. And it's beautiful. You know, they've got lots of icons, and they've got a very, very cluttered place of worship that are full of censers and holy water and icons everywhere and incense, and they have lots of signs and symbols and lots of jewelry.
Lots of history.
And huge amount of history that goes, that's fascinating history, goes through the czars. So are they pseudoscientific? Well, unfortunately, yes, because right now, here in Texas, in Blanco, Texas, there's a monastery that purports that their icon of the Virgin Mary cries tears of myrrh.
Myrrh.
Myrrh is a plant sap, and she is. An icon is a plaque. It's a picture of a deity or a saint.
Right.
Well, in the Russian Orthodox Church, it's almost always a saint, or the Virgin Mary, or Jesus, and or some biblical figure generally, but almost always a saint. And this icon just sits there, and it's a picture. And it's a picture of the Virgin Mary in this case. I forget if it's with the baby or not.
Okay.
But the point is their claim is that this picture miraculously materializes myrrh from the eyes and cries. Right? This is a falsifiable, non-scientific claim. And until the day they open their monastery and let me go in there and pick that thing up and look at it and verify that that is, in fact, what's going on, they have put themselves in my category of a cult organization, and I don't have to, and that's too bad. That's too bad, because they're very close to being legitimate in my definition.
That was an excellent example. We do have a caller. You want to try one?
Sure.
Okay, Chris is. Let's see if we can get Chris.
Hello.
Good morning.
Yeah, I was wondering, y'all consider the Mormon Church a cult too?
Yes, I definitely do. How about you?
Well, that's a good question. I've worked very hard on. Many people have submitted to me, why don't you discuss the Mormons? Why don't you call them a cult? I mean, they've got a lot of the characteristics of a cult, and then they start listing them off. And for example, they'll say they had a tremendously charismatic leader who led a flock away, and these people followed him, and he materialized tablets from God, which are strangely missing.
Yeah,
you know, and they go on through all of these different things. They formed a little group. They have strange ritualistic beliefs, particularly about underwear. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they wear special underwear.
Oh yeah, those white garments.
Right. They wear white garments, and they do. Some people have explained to me that they make claims about getting your own sort of star when you die, and some other very exotic things. The point is, though, and they also make claims about the life of Christ, where Christ not only was living in the Middle East when he was alive, but he also materialized and appeared to the North American Indians and the South American Indians, and this is all explained in the Book of Mormon. Certainly, most definitions of a cult organization would basically make the following claim. Yes, the Mormon Church is a cult, and it's a cult that's extremely successful. So successful that it's probably crossed the line into now what is called a legitimate large religion. And certainly most Christian organizations, that's exactly the way they think. So I won't. So I will represent their point of view there. But now, as far as my definition goes, I've looked closely at this, and I have seen no specifically falsifiable pseudoscientific claims made by the Mormon Church. If you come across one, let me know, so I can start start sticking it in their face, right? But I have not found anything that meets my definition, which means that every miracle that they claim has happened in a way that's not falsifiable. Meaning, for example, the resurrection of Christ, or the breaking of the bread or the fish that fed all these people. Right. I can't go back and check. You know, it's not falsifiable. It's a fable. It's a story. It may be historically true, but I can't check, and you can't prove it to me. So therefore, I can't go back and even check these claims that the Mormon Church makes. But they make no contemporary claims. They don't claim to do materializations. They don't claim to talk to the dead. They don't claim anything strictly falsifiable at this time. They do have a lot of the other elements. They have an extremely patriarchal structure. They have a very hierarchical structure. They have rituals that they certainly have sects within them that are very, very outsider fearful. They're extremely evangelical. Lots and lots and lots of people would agree with the call. I don't know if the caller agrees or not, but would definitely say that the Mormon Church is a cult.
Oh, I do agree.
Yeah, but I under my very strict definition, will not be discussing the Mormon Church today because I haven't seen any specifically falsifiable claims about physical reality.
I can't think of any right off the hand.
Right.
I'm not,
but certainly beware regarding the Mormon Church. I mean, if you're very concerned about things like typical cult things, then certainly you have to look closely at the Mormon Church.
any other? You still there, caller? I thought that it sounded like you hung up there. I heard the click there.
Well, I guess he was satisfied.
Just
with
remind everybody, we are live November 1st, and we will be at North Cross Mall when we leave here today, and we're taking your phone calls live there on that's our telephone number. I'm sitting here discussing this, and the more I think about my own personal definition of a cult is the idea that they say they have the only answers, not to look anywhere else, and that just puts about every religious group I can think of, because that's one of their tenets there growing up, and that, hey, here's the Bible, don't look anywhere else, this has got all the answers, and so
very common. There's two ways that manifests itself, right? There's the let's just consider what would typically be called a Christian cult organization, and there's lots of these now. There's small branches of people who call themselves, who definitely are Christian, they're Bible following, and but somehow they're different from the rest of the Christians, and they make sure that everybody knows that they're different. Yeah. And they make the claim that unless you're part of our doctrine, you're not really Christian. And our answer is the only correct answer within the Christian community.
Yes.
And then there are those versions of the kind of psychology you're speaking of that claim that we're not even Christian, we're totally different, but our answers are still the only answers. And what this does is, this is part of the sort of the mainstream what is a cult idea. This produces an in-group and an out-group. This produces an us versus them mentality. And an us versus them mentality is not all that you need for a cult, though. I mean, the Libertarian Party has sort of an us versus them mentality, right? We have, our noble thinking, we want freedom, and everybody else is an authoritarian, evil, a demagogue of, or corporate-controlled or communist-controlled or something. So the in-group, out-group is not in itself a bad thing, but it, in conjunction with all these other things, can be quite a problem. But you have in-group and out-group in different ways. You have, we're the best Christians of all the Christians, and of course everybody else is just a pagan or a heretic. Yeah. But then there's, no, all those people who are practicing these religions are, controlled by demonic forces, and we are the correct.
What gets me is like the Jehovah's got the exact number that's going to heaven, and so,
interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yes, and I really want to. I really would love to jump on that as more evidence that they're a cult. However, it's an unfalsifiable statement.
Yes. We do have a caller. I think her name is Josephine. Yes. And let's give it a try. Josephine?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just turned on the TV and saw your program, so I'm not sure if I can ask a question.
You can ask anything you want.
That doesn't deal with a Christian religion.
Help yourself.
But what about the Sikh religion?
Sikh religion. Yeah, you're talking about, it's a... So you're asking me if the Sikh religion is a cult?
Correct.
Well, one of the hard parts about what I'm trying to do with it, which is exposing pseudoscientific cults, is there are so many organizations in the world that need to be looked at carefully. And Sikhism is certainly an interesting organization. They're right now, people might call them a cult just because they're constantly having military squabbles with Hindus and Muslims in their area, where they live in India. Do you know the name of that area? Is it Tamil or maybe it's Timor? I can't remember, but Sri Lanka? I can't recall right now. But you just can't know everything about everybody so well to know whether or not they specifically make pseudoscientific claims. What people would claim is the following, that Sikhism is to, gosh, it's either Muslim or Hindu, because
wondering
they're into it. It is to those religions as, say, Methodist is to Christianity. It's a small. It's a sort of it's a segment of a larger whole of a larger religious construction. To my knowledge, they make no specifically anti-scientific claims, but that certainly doesn't mean that without a closer look that they would. I would certainly not call them a cult. For one other thing is that you don't see them, usually if you're going to make pseudoscientific claims that to meet my definition, you almost always come to the United States to do it.
Well, we've got the freedom to do it.
Yeah, we've got not only the freedom to do it, but we've got a lot of people who are versed enough in science to actually confuse themselves into thinking that you're actually making sense. And although there are a lot of Sikhs here, as far as I can tell, they're just another religious organization. And now they meet a lot of the trappings of other definitions of a cult, right? They dress enough distinctively to keep them separate from regular society. They have very careful rules about how to conduct your life, et cetera, et cetera. But again, those don't interest
actually they can interact with
who you can interact with. It's very orthodox.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of groups that would say basically any orthodox religion is a cult. That's not my definition. I don't really.
I think I'm leaning that direction myself.
I understand most atheists will, and perhaps your caller does. What do you think, caller?
Well, I didn't know enough about it and to really make a decision.
Yeah, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to see. I'm not an expert on the world's religions. I know a lot about the world's religions. I'm an expert on pseudoscientific cults, and Sikhism has never appeared in that context. So I'll have to beg off on all the details about what Sikhism is. But I do know that they are a mainstream religion in some part of the world.
Well, thank you very much.
Now that doesn't mean that.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Now there is an interesting point. What's a mainstream religion in one place, when it comes somewhere else, appears extremely cultic, and may in fact be a cult somewhere else. And this is probably one of the things that Hare Krishna is most exemplifies. I mean, they basically have a lot of very standard Hindu doctrines that transplant in the United States suddenly meet the definitions that most people will have about what a cult is. You know, this in-group, this sort of fanaticism, this sort of separation, this strict rules of living, et cetera, et cetera. But living in India, that would not necessarily be a cultic organization, unless you think all of India is walking around in a cult.
Let's try another call here. Tim?
Hey, guys.
Good morning.
I like the broad definition of a cult, which encompasses a lot of things. I think pretty much everybody is involved in a cultist belief in one way or another.
Yes, sir.
One of my favorites is the atheist belief.
I was wondering, I thought you might be going that direction.
You knew where I was going.
Yes.
But you would not believe the fanatics that follow Charles Darwin like a god that are part of the atheist movement.
Yes, sir.
There are a lot of cult tendencies in that broad definition.
Mm-hmm.
Also flying in the face of pseudoscience.
Sure.
You being a physics guy surely can struggle with the concept of something coming from nothing, which flies in the face of science.
It's a big question, isn't it? Yeah.
And everybody has their own leap of faith that they're going to have to make. And I think it's okay to go ahead and dog some of the really dumb ones, you know, like Scientology and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of easy, isn't it? Yeah.
But, I mean, you have to be real careful on how far you dog and, you know, who you dog and how you offend people.
Yeah, they have a tendency to sue, don't they?
Yeah, please stay online for a moment. I mean, the caller brings up some wonderful points, right? First of all, you can make a definition of a cult that's sufficiently broad that everybody is part of one. And I'm not sure if that's so bad, you know.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, you know, the question really is the nature of what is called in, actually the field of cult psychology is kind of elaborate. And what they call a destructive cult. That's the term that they're now trying to use as much as possible. And they use a very broad definition still. And the nature of a destructive cult is a little bit different than, like I said, I mean, are you a cult if you're a Catholic? The atheist organization, specifically atheists in general, would meet, sure, some of this laundry list of characteristics of a cult. I mean, like I say, the Marine Corps meets a large portion of the longest laundry list of cult characteristics. The Marine Corps probably meets 75% of those. However, you know, you could certainly argue that, you know, when was the last time an atheist organization ended up sucking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of individual members? the Marine Corps applies health care to their people. You know, you get a paycheck from the Marine Corps, whereas if you go to work at a Scientology organization, you effectively are paying them to work there. I mean, you draw a small stipend, but
in a broad sense, the atheist movement, if you have a broad term, sucks a lot of money out of a lot of people, a lot of unwilling people.
Oh, for example?
For example, the environmentalist movement is basically based on Darwin worship, and a lot of the money that's sucked into, you know, some of the organizations are just totally bogus and going to line somebody's pockets. And a lot, I mean, like Greenpeace and stuff, you know, which do a lot of good work, but if you put it in a broad sense of a cult, I mean, a lot of idiots are giving money for something they don't have any idea what. Greenpeace is probably a better cult, you know, example than some of the other.
Well, you know, you need to join the Libertarian Party because
you are a member?
Yes.
Well, there you go. Because it's one thing that's definitely true is that any organization that gets enough of a hold of a powerful political apparatus can be accused of basically transfer of wealth, right, from one segment of society to another.
That's why I subscribe to the libertarian philosophy and also a Christian at the same time.
Right. So you would object, for example, to a Christian taking control of our government, which is a far more imminent problem, I think, right now than. Well, it's hard to say.
Well, me and Ray have discussed before. I believe that we're in the end times, so I'm very wary of anybody taking control, because that is part of the prophecy. We're going to have the Antichrist pop up in Europe here shortly.
Sure.
In Europe.
Now, let me ask the caller this question: if somebody has a conviction that the Antichrist is going to appear, and I've spoken to many people in Austin who have such a conviction.
I believe he's alive now.
That certainly does not mean that you are a member of a destructive cult, right? That just means you have a particular belief that is extremely, it's very relevant to you. Now, my question is the following: if you make, well, my supposition is the following: if you make a falsifiable claim regarding that, then you're suddenly in trouble. For example, you say the Antichrist is alive right now. Okay, I can't argue, and I won't under my definition of a cult. And this is why my definition is so good. As far as I'm concerned, you're just a guy who has a very specific belief, and that belief is grounded in Scripture for all of this business. However, I was at a meeting a little while ago, the Texas Best Seminars, and not only was the Antichrist alive at this moment, but his name was Prince Charles.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty,
you see?
Pretty lame.
Now I can.
That up with Scripture.
Well, that was their conclusion. It wasn't just Scripture. It was sort of a historical analysis, etc., etc. Now I have something to jump on, and now I can say, look, let me go through the life of Prince Charles and show you why he is almost certainly the prince of Dingleberries. Yeah, the prince of chumps, certainly not the prince of darkness. And so now I have something to sink my teeth into. But as long as you sit around and say, hey, Antichrist is on Earth right now, the end times is going to happen, you know, I don't really care about challenging your belief until you come down and say, and it will happen in the year 2000 on January 15th. And then I'll say, okay, buddy, look, I'm going to sit here in this chair, and I'm going to wait till January 2000 on January 15th, or January 12th. That's my daughter's birthday. Let's end the world on that day. And if that doesn't happen, if what you say doesn't happen, then I'm going to dismiss you entirely. That's why I can dismiss the Jehovah's Witnesses. They have gone through this 3 times.
Oh yeah,
and they have finally
every 10 years.
Yeah, that's right. But now they have finally realized that my definition is the sensible one, and they have retracted all end-of-the-world claims, all date claims of the end of the world.
Didn't the Mormons make claims to it?
I don't think so.
Mormons don't even believe we're in the end times.
Well, I was under the impression Mormons actually.
They're always prepared for it. They stock a lot of food for it, but they don't think we're in it right now.
Yeah.
This call is making some very good points, I think. The Russian Orthodox Church also believes we are in the end times, but they speak of it very vaguely. They speak of it very
metaphorically.
You know, it's strange because they speak of it vaguely in the sense like we don't know exactly when the end times are going to be, but they do believe in the Antichrist. I don't think they've ever said he's alive right now, but it seems like they keep thinking like tomorrow will be it, but they never come out and say it. And so in that context, they don't meet my definition.
That's a good way to live.
Yeah,
it might happen tomorrow. Might as well get it.
But certainly I would not, that belief alone is insufficient to meet the definition that I offer as a as a pseudoscientific-based cult organization.
I just really wanted to make the point that even atheism has some fanatical members to it that can be considered a cult by some people.
Well, let me just ask about atheism. I've certainly met a lot of atheists who don't truly understand the theory of evolution, and that atheism does typically go into science very heavily to make some of its points. And the theory of evolution is, you know, it's a theory that I will use to suggest who might be a pseudoscientific cult organization. For example, a creationist group that claims that people and dinosaurs existed on the Earth at the same time. That flies in the face of a lot of very solid scientific understanding.
Sure,
and
I wouldn't make that claim.
Scientific creationism, I would put in the part of a pseudoscientific organization. And so it sort of meets my definition in the most minor way, because they don't do anything else, right? They don't siphon money from its members. They don't have charismatic leaders that are worshipped. They have people that are respected and followed. They don't, you know, they ask for money in very moderate ways. They don't have isolation of members in principle. But they meet my definition. So in this case, here's a group that would meet almost nobody else's definition, yet would meet mine. So what do you...
Once you introduce David, David, introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, please.
David Kent. I think I can persuade you, Rohan, that Mormonism is a cult, but first I have a nice little story about Scientology,
all right,
which I think everybody admits is a cult. This happened about 4 or 5 years ago, and involves my ex-wife, who was working for a bookbinding company here in Austin. And they were quite prominent nationwide. Their high quality of work that they were doing. And the Scientology headquarters in Los Angeles, I think under David Miscavige, contacted this bookbinding company. And he had a proposition to make. He had the lectures of Lafayette Ronald Hubbard, their illustrious founder, and he wanted to have these bound in a limited edition to teach to the more advanced members of the organization there in Los Angeles. And the company did that after several dummy bindings and so on. They finally agreed on a format, and they produced a limited edition of his works, which gave the Scientology organization in Los Angeles another idea. They decided to make a time capsule for Scientology and to put into it their most treasured possessions and memorabilia and of course, teachings of Mr. Hubbard, and put these in a time capsule that was going to be a 10,000-year capsule to be opened up and discovered and read by people 10,000 years.
So everybody could audit and clear themselves 10,000 years from now.
Yes, if they still had e-meters, then they could clear themselves.
Well, I'm sure there was an e-meter in the capsule to get them started.
No doubt. Well, this was 3 or 4 years ago, and the proposal came through to this organization, and I was talking with the owner of the company, and he was describing what the proposal was from the Church of Scientology. And I said, well, you know, if you know the history of languages, how far back does the English language go? How far back does any language go on Earth? And I said, 10,000 years is a lot of time. Do these people realize, do they have any idea what, how the language is going to develop over a period of 10,000 years, assuming the species is still here? I said, whatever is spoken 10,000 years from now is going to be completely alien to anything we're familiar with. And he said, you know, that's the point. He says, maybe I ought to bring this up with the the group in Los Angeles next time we speak. And he did, and they said, oh, that never occurred to us. And so their solution to this was, they had the precious, priceless lectures of Mr. Hubbard that they wanted to transmit to posterity far in the distant future. And so what they did was go out and collect every known dictionary of every language on Earth.
Oh, I see.
And they assigned this group in Austin to photocopy on archival quality paper every page of every dictionary all over the Earth, in the hopes that whoever opens this thing up 10,000 years from now is going to be able to
interesting
to use those dictionaries to read Mr. Hubbard's lectures. Well, I think what that shows you about the Church of Scientology is laughable, of course. What that shows you about the Church of Scientology is that, as sophisticated and slick as they like to make themselves appear to be, essentially they're very naive.
Oh, yeah.
Very gullible, no forethought, no real grasp of of the real world.
Yeah. For example, what you've said just it indicates a couple things. One is first of all, the initial argument you put forward is not necessarily a rock solid argument. It's an interesting argument, but it's not necessarily rock solid. And they probably should have thought carefully before they collected dictionaries. And their solution, of course, shows no understanding of linguistics whatsoever.
That was
Yeah,
my point.
yeah.
You know, time capsule for 100 years is reasonable, but 10,000 years is completely
Yeah.
out of the end. The other thing...
that's a great story, actually. I mean,
you mentioned something about, well, there are other little stories. They're not supposed to let go of their e-meters. Unfortunately, one of them did, and it got into a local Goodwill, and my son picked it up and tore it open to see what was inside. That's another story.
I'll be talking about the e-meter today at FERS in detail.
Well, perhaps he can bring his e-meter along.
Well, if you have one, I'd love to see it brought along. But
he's got one disassembled.
All I have is a picture.
Well, the other thing is, you mentioned earlier on in the program that you weren't going to discuss Mormonism, and I'm not trying to make you discuss it, but I do. That is my background.
Oh, okay.
I was a Mormon for several years.
Let me say, it's not that I wasn't going to discuss it. It's that I've specifically attempted and have excluded it under my definition.
Right. You have a specific definition of cult, and I think this probably will make it.
Okay, let's go. I've been looking for one.
The basic question is whether or not they have advanced any falsifiable claims.
Falsifiable claims, yes.
Now, recently, I know under Gordon Hinckley, they're trying to mainstream their religion. They're trying to play down anything that would be objectionable to any person. But historically, it's very interesting. The Book of Mormon is still endorsed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City as a divine revelation.
Sure, of course.
Joseph Smith, he translated the gold plates and the angel, all that kind of thing. They have tried for years and years, out of using the resources of Brigham Young University, to prove or establish the historical foundations of the Book of Mormon. Through archaeological means, they've gone back to try to find any trace in North America or Central America of the fauna, flora, metals, smelting horses, elephants, all these kinds of things that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon. And they've spent an enormous fortune on this, and the result is zero. Everything that they've claimed in the Book of Mormon, or is described in the Book of Mormon, is completely bogus. None of the none of the aspects of the Book of Mormon, which could be considered historical, have been verified. Have been.
Ooh, okay. I'll have to think about that. Okay.
The evidence hasn't been forthcoming, to the point that a couple of years ago, the head of the reorganized church, this is a group that stayed in Missouri when all of the rest of them moved out to Utah under Brigham Young. Their basic distinction between the two groups is that they don't accept that Joseph Smith ever practiced polygamy, and the Utah group claims that he does. Well, the group in Independence, Missouri, the last time they were headed by lineal descendants of Joseph Smith. Well, they finally ran out of those, and they installed a man who had been to a theological seminary a few years ago. And this man made a public statement on behalf, as prophet, seer, and revelator of the reorganized LDS Church in Missouri, that as far as the Book of Mormon was concerned, he didn't think that it should be accepted as an historical document.
Interesting.
Which was an earth-shaking pronouncement. He said there are moral teachings and so on that he could accept. He was going to keep it for the benefit of his church, which really put the pressure on the people in Salt Lake City to
abandon
take the same position.
Yeah, I
because
see. Interesting.
It's abundantly clear that the story was made up. A couple of other points about falsifiability. In 1843, about a year before he was killed, there were a group of people living in Missouri who were non-Mormons, and they thought, well, they came up with the obvious idea, let's try to hoax Joseph Smith. And so they came up with what they called the Kinderhook plates.
What year was this again? Say that again.
1843.
1843.
Might have been 42, 42,
just
43.
Before the Civil War.
He was killed in 1844.
Okay.
A couple of years before he died. Yeah. These farmers came up with this idea. Well, they made these brass plates about as big as an axe head, and they went to work with engravers and a little curious, their idea of what some ancient plate was. He claimed that he got the Book of Mormon from these ancient gold plates. Well, they scribbled little hieroglyphic signs on them on both sides of these things, and about a half a dozen of them, and they buried it and fabricated some huge skeleton, and then they let Joseph Smith know that they had discovered, they buried this thing in an old Indian burial mound out there, I think this, and let Joseph Smith hear about this wonderful discovery that they had made. Well, of course, he was instantly right on it. And so he saw a couple of these plates, and he instantly sat down and translated them and said, yes, this was written on here by the hand of Ham.
Interesting.
And he said the skeleton here was a 9-foot skeleton. It was an early inhabitant of this nation. And he said, I have had a revelation from God, which tells me
yeah, I see.
that the man, this was the man who wrote on these plates and gave this story. And he came up with a pretty coherent little translation of these so-called Kinderhook plates. Well, these guys waited about 6 months until Joseph Smith had
pretty much committed himself.
And the report was published in the Times and Seasons, the Mormon newspaper at the time. So it was in print that he had endorsed this and accepted this as a genuine record. Then they came out and exposed the whole thing, explained their methods in producing it, and thought that they had put stop to him. Well, the Mormon Church resisted this for years and years and years, trying to various pretexts to deny it, although it turns out that Joseph Smith had recorded the whole thing in his personal journal. It was reported in the newspapers. There's no way they were going to wriggle out of it.
Sure.
In 1981, it took that long, believe it or not, for this thing, for the Mormon Church in their church organ, the ensign, to admit that he was hoaxed.
Interesting. But it was a final admission, right?
It was a final admission by the church. They really don't have any more explanation to give. It's an embarrassing thing that they would like to cover up.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting phenomenon that I'm wondering if it's... I'm sorry, Matt.
A couple of other quick points I could make. These, now, they do wriggle out of these 2 points, but they're interesting points. Joseph Smith had a revelation, supposedly from God, that in the 85th year of his age, Christ would come again. Now, he was born in 1805. This would be 1890, Christ would come again. Well, they wriggle out of this by saying, he recorded this revelation, but he never put it into their book of official revelations. Doctrine and Covenants is one of the primary things. And so they said, well, this is just when he's speaking as a prophet, he's speaking as a prophet. When he's speaking as a man, he's subject to error.
I see.
He also, there was a faithful follower, Oliver B. Huntington, asked him one time, are there people living on the moon? Now, this is a safe thing to talk about in 1840, whatever.
Sure.
Who's going to go up there and check? And he said, yes, there are people living on the moon. They live nearly 1,000 years old on average. They dress like the Quakers, and he gave some other details about how these inhabitants of the moon lived. Well, the Mormon Church is notorious for buying up evidence and suppressing it. But this was considered such a great story that the official women's publication in the 1890s published this. So again, it was out there in the public realm, couldn't be suppressed. So the story actually got through. Well, they said, this is just a private revelation, not official, so we escape out of that. But the where he can be checked, where he was specific enough to be checked, everything that he has claimed has been
well. The interesting thing is
shown to lack evidence.
There's a lot of really interesting things about this that I'm one of the things that I'm most curious about right now is where is the point where you can say a cult has transitioned into a mainstream religion? Well, and one of the signs I'm suggesting is when they actually do go back and clean up their past. When they actually acknowledge these things, then which is a little bit different. Scientology has not even begun this process. No. The Mormon Church and the Catholic Church have both stepped in that direction. I knew the Catholic Church had. I didn't even know these stories about the Mormon Church.
Well, isn't it true that every mainstream religion began basically as a cult?
Well,
many of them did.
Under the definitions of most people, that's one of the arguments that most cult members make today, is they'll say, well, if we were back in Jesus' time, wouldn't you be sitting here calling him a cult leader? And there's arguments for and against that if you're interested in squabbling over doctrine, if you're interested in going to the details of their holy books and looking at this proverb versus that proverb, sure, you can make all kinds of great arguments. Like I said, I'm primarily interested in these very falsifiable ones. Now, the story you gave me about the hoax is really interesting because first of all, it shows that there were intelligent people even back then who kind of knew what was going on. Well, yeah. But hoaxes are dangerous because the people who purport hoaxes are usually very smart, but they don't realize how much momentum a religious organization can get behind something like this. And the Mormon Church probably won with these tablets. I'll bet that they promoted themselves a lot better than these guys promoted the hoax.
Let me tell you another.
Let me just go to a caller really quick.
Okay, there's one other interesting thing I think as far as falsifiable thing, and then I'll be done with the Mormons.
Okay.
which we ought to bring in, and then we can catch this person. That is, one of the primary books of Scripture of the Mormon Church is the Book of Moses, Book of Abraham. And this was based on translations of Egyptian funerary material that Joseph Smith bought from a man named Michael Chandler, who picked these up in Egypt and was traveling around the country displaying them. Well, he came to Illinois, I think, at the time, and Joseph Smith persuaded him to sell him some of these. These were basically things that this man had had got from traders in Egypt.
Interesting.
And Joseph Smith bought a fair amount of these, raised a fund, and then he translated these things, so-called, and this became the Book of Moses and the Book of Abraham. He said, this was written by the hand of Abraham, and here is his signature, and you have the thing called the Book of Abraham in Mormon Scripture. Well, the difficulty with, I think they call that hypocephalus. I'm not sure exactly what the term is for the particular hieroglyphic material that he translated, or claimed to have translated. Well, after he translated, a few years after he translated it, and after his death, these mysteriously disappeared. Nobody knew where they went, but the Mormon Church was quite safe. They had the translation. This is Joseph Smith's translation of these ancient Egyptian documents.
But the documents are gone, it
in
says.
the Book of, if you look at a copy of the Book of Mormon, you'll find a couple of reproductions of these documents that he translated. Well, they disappeared mysteriously. Nobody knew where they went, assumed that they had been destroyed or lost. And quite recently, in this century, they turned up in the New York Metropolitan Museum. And
now can really be translated.
The Egyptologists did not know what to make of Joseph Smith back then. He put out what he called an Egyptian grammar. Well, Egyptologists were not knowledgeable enough.
I see. Now this counts.
This
counts.
To find out what this, whether it was valid or not, or just something he made up. Well, when this came out in this century, Egyptology was quite advanced, and what they discovered, what they found was, when they examined this material in the out of New York, was that the Egyptian material that Joseph Smith translated dated back to the 1st century A.D. Nothing like 2000.
Whoops.
And it was typical. It was one of an extremely common type of material that was buried.
Sure. Yeah, it's probably the most routine document about like real estate policy or something.
You know, if we had a habit of burying our last will and testament with our bodies, you know, it would be something like that. Very, very common. Dated from the 1st century A.D. They looked at Joseph Smith's Egyptian grammar and said, this guy is a complete fake.
And where is the church standing on this translation now?
They still maintain that they have the Book of Abraham and the Book of Moses. Those are still accepted as fundamental scriptures.
Okay.
They have admitted that their status is questionable.
Interesting.
That's as far as they will go. They
Interesting.
Won't give it up.
This is a good claim that heads in the direction of pseudoscience, because we're talking about wonderful elements of falsifiability. You know, there's a lot of story about the Mormon Church. It's really interesting.
That's all I want.
Let me get our caller who's been waiting a long time.
Sure.
David Kent says a knowledgeable person.
You know,
is Mr. Humphreys now able to lead a family?
I've really been interested in trying to get to the bottom of the Mormon Church claims, and the history is just so rich that it's just taken me too much time. But I would claim that right now, actively, I'd have to say I still claim that they don't make blatant anti-scientific claims like some do.
All right, this is November 1st. We are taking your phone calls live on the air. And as a matter of fact, let's go to Joe.
Hello.
Good morning, Joe.
Thanks for waiting, Joe.
Okay?
Yes.
I was wondering if y'all were taking calls today.
Yes, sir.
Okay, a couple of things that did not get mentioned this morning. By the way, I'm Joe Zamecki, normally the co-host of the show. There's a blood drive we set up for the next quarter, January 23rd of next year. And we had a really great one this last time, October 17. I gave some blood myself. Also, in response to Tim, who called earlier, you know, he's a normal caller, and we love Tim. But the Darwinism cult idea, I have a comment on that. I think it's silly. I think the very definition of a cult would be naturally selected right out of that thinking.
Okay, yeah. Now let me suggest the following thing. There are scientific-based cults. There are people who take us. See, just as there are people who take a very small religious idea and blow it up to the moon and form an exotic cult following around it, there are people who take scientific ideas and blow them out of proportion, make no sense out of them, and follow them like a cult. and I'm not suggesting that I know of any that use Darwin's theory of evolution that have done this, but I do know people who have taken the notion of quantum mechanics and just run with it to such an exotic, wacky limit that it makes no sense physically anymore. The scientific elements that exist there in quantum mechanics are completely unknown or forgotten to these people, but the language is used over and over again. There's uncertainty principle, and there's holistic back action principles, and then there's time travel, and there's all of these notions have been exotified into, have just been made so exotic, have been made so exotic that they do form a cult. And many, many New Age cults surround scientific principles that are misunderstood and misapplied. I don't know of anybody who has taken literally formed a cult of this type around Darwin. I think most people who, I've heard people use the theory of evolution in absurd and ridiculous ways that are completely unsubstantial and unfalsifiable. There's a lot of people who really respect the idea of evolution and apply it to everything. You know, there's evolution in the marketplace, and there's evolution in, there's people who claim that our little fingers will be disappearing because of evolution, who certainly don't understand the notion that natural selection is a process that requires selection, and you'd have to have people, you know, with long little fingers getting killed more than people with short little fingers, right? So there are people who don't understand the theory of evolution. But I would agree, I don't know of any specific cult organizations that have taken that scientific principle and blown it out of limits.
Any other points there, Joe?
Yeah, it's just a matter of common sense, I think. Also, speaking of cults, Bill Murray's in town. Not the funny Bill Murray, but the very unfunny William Murray, son of Madeline O'Hare. And he's in town speaking at some church somewhere. And if you want to talk about cults, there you go. Good example. Another one is the Pope is coming to America in January, the 25th and the 26th of January of '99. And I plan on being there personally to picket this person. And I'll have a report on that next time.
Thank you.
After that. Also, I just want to say there's the widening definitions of cult. And a whole lot of people just love the fact that definitions widen so they can fit that in with their agenda. But, you know, you could probably say the Marines are a cult, like you were saying earlier. But another one that immediately came to mind for me, since a lot of people now think this way, the libertarians. Can we get a comment from Ray on libertarianism? That's not a cult now, is it?
No,
I mentioned that. Didn't I mention that?
Yes. Okay.
And Ron's a big libertarian too, and everybody in the group knows I'm I definitely tell them to vote libertarian every time. And but what I don't consider them a cult, because my definition, libertarian, I've never heard them say they have the only answer. They want you to make the decision on how you decide you run your life.
That's cool. I'm just kidding anyway.
Okay. But well, it was an excellent point.
Well,
anything else there, Joe?
Just our website, and that's it. Thanks a lot.
Yes,
all
sir.
Right. Have a good day.
Before we go to the next caller,
sure,
let me just mention a few things. One, the notion of the Marine Corps being a cult. I want to say unequivocally and absolutely that is not my position. Okay? I'm a former Marine, and I'm extremely proud to be a former Marine. You know, and I'll tell you what, let me list the following things that I did in the Marine Corps that would certainly satisfy a lot of people's definition of a cult. I joined the Marine Corps and I shaved my head, right? I shaved my head before I got in. I was in college, running around with no hair in my head. I have a picture of it in my pocket. Okay, I read a lot about the history of the Marine Corps. I was really into the history, and Marines could do nothing wrong. Despite the fact that they landed on Tarawa in water that was 6 feet deep, with barricades under fire from enemy forces, in probably what was the dumbest assault in all of naval history, a miracle that they won. Instead of saying, boy, were they stupid, I said, wow, those guys were brave, right? Okay. Now, I still have a great deal of respect, of course, for the American forces and the impetus of World War II, and I understand why that happened. However, the Battle of Tarawa was a major mistake, and a lot of Marines will not talk about it in the context of being a major mistake. And this is slightly cultish thinking.
Yes.
There was another indication, there's another example of slight cultish thinking with the Marine Corps, in that we're very proud of a man named Archibald Henderson, the old grandfather of the Marine Corps. He was he ran the Marine Corps for about 40 years, from the first commandant, I think is what he was. And he did it from 1700 to something to 1800 and something. And he basically was massacred the Seminole Indians in Florida. This is a very bad thing, very, very bad thing. You know, genocide is not a good policy, you know, any time in history, right? And I know atheists talk a lot about the wandering moral values through time, you know, where the church sponsored some very horrible things in the past it would never sponsor now, and certainly this is a hint that they don't have a really good bead on absolute morality, right? Well, in the Marine Corps, it's the same way, right? Okay, there's number two. The history of the Marine Corps, you know, hook, line, and sinker, bought it all completely. Number three is there's an extreme amount of feeling in the Marine Corps that they're the best service, right? That the Marines are, without a doubt, much better than the Army, and they're much better than the Green Berets. The average Marine is 10 times better than the best Green Beret, right? and so there we are. We're all hyped up on that. So a lot of these things. Oh, and there's a tendency not to leave. Once you're in the Marine Corps, you know, you find it very hard to suddenly leave, you know, because you've basically been part of this organization for all, and exclusively part of it. And you're not allowed to leave, right? It's against the law of the land to just say, I've had enough of this. I think I'm going to go, you know, I think I'm going to go be a duck hunter or something, you know. So all of these things would fit a lot of cult definitions. However, there's a lot of things that don't, and those are the most important things that don't. Oh God, there's the worship of the leader, right? The commandant of the Marine Corps is more than just like the general in charge. He's the commandant. He's part of a long line of commandants that are carefully chosen because of, and so, you know, this is a great test case for your definition. The other thing, though, I want to mention is that they have a great concern and care for their people, and it's a legitimate concern and care for their people. And so, in a lot of ways, it cannot be considered a destructive cult. You get a lot out of it. You know, you don't come away with an e-meter and a bunch of books by Hubbard, right?
Let's try Johnny.
Yeah.
Good morning.
I heard some of the comments that Ronan made earlier. I guess I think he was probably right about that. Whenever you're talking about the different kinds. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I wasn't exactly sure which point, because we've talked several things.
Okay. When you're talking about different kinds of, I guess, evolution theories, people talk about, you said they talked about it, well, you know, in the marketplace, and they talked about it here and there.
Right.
Maybe I'm wondering what type you guys are. I really see it as there being three almost basic, distinct types. One from, like the biologist says, the biologist evolutionist says that, you know, it can't happen, you know, by the laws of physics and biology. Right. So he recounts that into his theory, and the theistic evolutionist may say, well, there's something put, you know, people here, and then it evolved from that, or it put, you know, something here, and then it came from that. And then you have maybe a purist, which is almost accepting the whole philosophy despite the first two.
Sure.
Interesting.
One of the biggest things right off the bat.
Please stay online.
The theory of evolution doesn't say anything to the point of where life started. Biogenesis is the beginning of life.
A very good place to start.
And so evolution has nothing to do with it. Evolution at any point is just a change in the DNA sequence in a population over a series of time. That is all evolution is. But a lot of people and a lot of the Christians and everybody think when an atheist uses evolution at any part of we're going all the way back to the beginning of life, and we're not. At this point they don't have the scientific answer for the exact biogenesis. There's several competing theories out there right now, and I'm not well versed enough or intelligent enough to really explain to our viewers or the layperson exactly what the current theories are. But
may I say something here?
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, I feel that that's a good point you just made. That is in regards to the biogenesis, the facts themselves. There's a lot of theories. You know, there's nothing really concrete. So at least there are some people who are honest enough to admit that, well, in reality, that you could say it's faith that you believe it, perhaps based on what you would look at today and see. But because it's not a fact and because it's is a theory, it is believed by some aspect of faith.
One of the basic laws of physics is matter is neither created nor destroyed.
Exactly.
So we're just showing that matter that's always been here and always will be here. We're just showing what it is at this point in time.
Well, that tends to disagree with the Big Bang theory, though.
No, it doesn't. The Big Bang.
That doesn't?
No, the Big Bang it goes on out, and there's a possibility of a big crunch, and so we just have we're just in between a big bang and a big crunch.
Sir, but did you see what you just did? After I asked about the Big Bang, and you proceeded to build on top of the fact that you don't know that there could be a big expansion. Speaking solely to the theory of the Big Bang, there is what the theory itself is that the subatomic there was space. Everything that's in the universe now, which has matter, was condensed into the size of less than a subatomic particle. And there wasn't even, and that's highly theoretical, because obviously no one could have seen anything like that.
But,
I'm just trying to point
evidence to the.
Excuse me.
We do have direct evidence of expanding universe.
That's right.
That is a scientific fact.
But is there enough mass in that universe that we know, if we discount the theory of dark matter, which no one can see, to pull that and contract it back?
Yeah, that's a good question.
But it doesn't have to be.
I'm sorry, sir. What you just said, it does. Go ahead.
I threw the Big Crunch out there as one possible theory.
Okay.
My own belief is time is infinite. There is no beginning and there is no end. And what we're seeing is just a state of flux that we're in right now at this particular point, that we're able to experience that. But you will never find the beginning of time.
I'd like to make a couple comments on the caller's first point, which is really interesting. There are different modes of looking at evolution, and it's interesting how everybody's slowly shuffling around a little bit. The first point about the biogenesis, there is a lot of great scientific mysteries in biology, a lot of really, really wonderful ones. There's the notion that the DNA chain and the genome chain inside a cellular division, nobody understands how it unravels and re-ravels during reproduction. And if you look at the mechanics of it very closely, it's really unbelievable. It's like we're not even close to understanding it. And it's a wonderful scientific question. I saw a physicist come lecture at UT about his study was these long molecules and how they wrap and unwrap, and it was unbelievable how he was just utterly perplexed how such a complicated long strand can unravel from its sort of tight ball, split, and then re-ravel, and it's a wonderful story.
That's a tremendous point Ronan just made, and we don't even have to go all the way to DNA and RNA and things like that. We can go all the way down to the making of even a single protein, the chains of amino acids. Now, let's say they all have to be left-handed. They all have to be in the proper line with the proper.
Well, the left-handedness is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of great scientific questions. Is sort of my point.
Go ahead.
But there's still scientific questions still. I mean, there's no reason to think that they are not answerable. It may not be for a long time, but it is really, really interesting. Now, the theory of evolution, as you said a moment ago, is sort of a logical theory about things that'll survive because other things get killed at a faster rate. It's a rate equation. This guy dies at rate X, and this guy dies at a slightly smaller rate. So this guy's going to grow, and that guy's going to shrink.
Hey, could I ask a quick question? Unless you want to finish.
Well, let me just finish this one concept because you had three different kinds of evolution.
Okay, go ahead.
So now, theistic evolution doesn't really challenge evolution. It doesn't challenge the fossil record or anything. No. It just suggests that theistic action sort of sticks its little finger in every now and then and makes this move along. And the reason that they put that in there is because of all these tough scientific questions. Certainly, it couldn't happen by accident, therefore there must be a God just nudging it along. But those people have at least made the advance of realizing that the fossil record, our system of carbon dating is relatively reliable. The fossil record is very compelling. Therefore, and unless you want to maintain that, hey, God just made it all look old and he faked us out and stuff like that, they've sort of abandoned the God's trying to fake us out principle and said, no, evolution happened, but God was there all along the way. And as long as that philosophy doesn't interfere with scientific research, as long as a scientist going out exploring the fossil record, I don't have to do anything differently than I've always done, it really is sort of irrelevant, in my opinion.
That's an interesting point you just made. I was going to ask something, but I'd like to maybe speak to what you just said at the end of the thing. Yeah, that's just so interesting. You said that about God faking people out, I guess, making the Earth look old.
That's sort of the argument for me.
I was just wondering, what is it that you think, out of curiosity, makes the Earth look old?
Oh, well, this is just,
I know it seems like a simple discussion, but just specifically, what would you be referring to? The rocks, the fossils?
For example, there's also the whole notion of of the speed of light and the distance of faraway galaxies. The universe is old.
Right.
There's the age of the sun, and then there's you can infer from the nature of the solar system also how long it took certain objects to form in a very meaningful way. I mean, the origin of the solar system.
Okay, like planets and stuff?
For example.
Okay, have we ever observed planets being formed?
Hubble has given us excellent.
Yes, very recently we have. Can you guys hear me out there?
Yes.
Yes, very
hang on,
well.
caller.
Okay.
Go ahead, Arlo.
Even Earth-sized planets can be detected by the wobble of a star, but it's more right now. As far as seeing planets forming, there are planets with about twice the mass of Jupiter that are detectable.
Hold on just a second now. Hold on just a second.
The caller's point, though, is have we seen a planet form? And obviously the answer is no.
Obviously the answer would be no.
We can see it in stages among various planets.
I'm not sure if the gentleman in the back is attempting to claim that there's from the best scientific information we have right now, the only planets we know about, only terrestrial planets we know about, are the ones inside the solar system.
And that's true.
There's maybe one, it could be two gas giants, which are probably out, under different stars. So there's no terrestrial. So I'm just trying to. Ronan pretty much cleared that up. That there's, that we can't see it form. So my only point is this: to assume how, we say that the way that the planets formed, that shows the age of the Earth. We don't know how planets form, so to assume that this is how it was and that's what proves it is really kind of, a duality in the logical basis.
I don't think so. I understand your point, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just suggesting to you that
in a pure scientific basis.
Well, it's
purely scientifically, it has to be like that. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just suggesting that we can use our power of thinking over things that we can control experimentally, and we can make very logical extrapolations. And this is what comes in conflict with a 10,000-year-old Earth.
Right. Sometimes.
But, regarding the Big Bang,
I'll go ahead and let you guys go. Sometimes perspectives and different biases have a tendency to paint one's view on this subject differently. Like you assume on top of something that we may not know, and you use a logic in determining that we have an old Earth, and someone else may assume on things that we do know in order to get a more accurate assessment. Thank you for the time, guys.
I appreciate it.
Hey guys, I want to make another comment though.
Go right ahead, Arlo.
I think this caller and many other people out there seem to treat a theory like it's not a fact yet, so it's not true or it can't be made true. A theory never turns into a fact because a theory is a process. Mathematics is a fact. 1 + 1 equals. Is a theory. 1 + 1 = 2 is just a theory.
Yeah, this is true. I would like to say that the last caller's his notion of trying to defend the young Earth, I claim, is definitely a pseudoscientific position because you're really denying so many pieces of very, very solid scientific evidence and reasoning.
That links to other scientific.
Sure, and it's all a big link. But now it is true, however, that when you start talking about the Big Bang and what caused the first quantum fluctuation, perhaps, that created the Big Bang, these are highly, highly, highly speculative theories in physics, even. It's a wonderful series of theories. It's a wonderful physics of the subatomic and the macro physics, but they're highly speculative. Even the notion of whether the universe was infinite in length and age, or whether it cycles, or whether there is dark matter or not, very speculative stuff.
And it's great that our human mind is able to take those further out. The possibility is like, okay, well, if this is a theory, then let's run it this far out and see what happens, and we come up with some really interesting things.
Well, let's get the rest of these guys.
Yes, let's go on down to Mike.
Yes, I was calling in to talk about. Basically, I was hoping that maybe y'all could give me and the rest of our listeners some more information. I was, it's almost bad. I don't even hardly want to talk about them. I've been thinking about the Jews here lately. I've been interested in the history because all of Christianity is actually based upon the teachings of the Jews. Jesus was supposed to be a Jew.
Good point.
But of course they claim that he was a false prophet and all that. And I've been reading a little bit about it, and it's kind of struck me as being rather odd that I've always thought that Jewish people was actually a race, and according to the Bible, they're actually not. Abraham, Abraham or something like that, was talked to by, God, presumably. It sounds more like an alien spacecraft to me was talking to him.
If you
do get that, but go ahead.
If you don't mind, I just wanted, I'd like to focus the conversation a bit on cults, if I can.
Right, but to me, the Jewish people do seem very cult-like.
So let me just address that question, right? If I was in, this is kind of weird, but if I was in Moses's flock, and he was going to make the claim about parting the Red Sea tomorrow morning to get us out of here, I would have left, right? I would have left. That would be a falsifiable claim that well, you know, I might have observed it. If my life wasn't being threatened by the Romans, I might have sat by just to laugh at them when it failed, right?
Right.
Now, the fact is that the story goes that he did part the Red Sea. I can't falsify it. Therefore, by my definition, no, they're not a cult because they don't make these pseudoscientific claims. Now, I think I can think of only the most extreme definition of a cult, which a lot of atheists would maintain, of course, because they're non-theists, would include the Jews as a cult organization. I certainly don't see them that way. I don't see them as they don't meet any of the definitions of a destructive cult organization. They don't meet any of the...
Not my point either.
Yeah, they're just a mainstream religion, and if you object to mainstream religion, you will object to the Judaism as much as you'll object to Catholicism.
No, I don't really feel like, I don't want to come across like I'm objecting to all this. It just kind of surprised me when I started reading this, and but you know, being on the outside, we know very little about the Jewish people, the Orthodox Jewish people, should I say?
Oh no, we know plenty. We know plenty.
Well,
if you want to know more, read The Chosen by Chaim Potok. There's no secrecy inside the Now, there is a cultic version of Judaism that's organized on the Kabbalah. That's very interesting, and I'm just beginning to research them. They definitely have made cultic, pseudoscientific claims. I can't explain much about them now, but they have a campus organization, and it's a Jewish-centered cult. There's no doubt. But this is a New Age thing. It's not part of mainstream tradition. Mainstream Jewish scholars and academics understand the Kabbalah and its historical context and what it means, just like mainstream Christian thinkers understand the archaeological evidence for Christianity, the early Christians and their martyrdom, and the history of the Roman Empire and all that. They have a very solid understanding of a lot of those aspects. And I would like to dismiss that notion.
I don't consider the Jews a cult myself either.
Yeah.
Any other points, caller?
No, that's about it. Like I said, I haven't really been reading too much on it, but you know, it's just that, you know, with all the talk about all the other little fractions of Christianity, you know, I mean, that's the one that started it all.
Yeah, the Jews could actually claim the Christians were a cult that started, 2,000 years ago.
And they do. And
but there is one other thing now that I think about it.
Sure.
They were saying that they were chosen to lead a mission of the Brotherhood of Man.
Interesting.
Right. Now, if...
The chosen people.
Right. And of course I've heard it said, well, I don't know what they were chosen for, but that's actually what drew me to read more about one of these little paperback books that I found. And it was said that Abraham was told that they were to lead the earth, lead the, mankind into a brotherhood. Kind of like we got NATO and stuff now. And I was thinking, well, if I got my head right about this, after they had their choice on who they were going to crucify, Jesus or one of the some thief, and they said crucify Jesus, and something about the blood being on their hand for 2,000 years. Now, correct me, but wouldn't that be the year 2000 or 2036 or something? Would be after the crucifixion?
Yeah, because
who cares?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because even if you don't believe in Jesus, I mean, they did crucify somebody. They
crucified thousands of people.
Right. But that is in records.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I mean. I certainly, that's why I stick to my very solid definition of cult, because I do not want to sit in there and argue each passage of the Bible and whether or not this means that. I just don't care.
I was just wondering if they had like some kind of date set,
No, there's no date. They have no
like
date.
That, no?
They're not apocalyptic. The Jews are not an apocalyptic organization. No.
Nothing like that.
It's just a totally naive reading, I think.
What was that book you were saying that would say a lot about that?
Yeah, it's a fiction book by Chaim Potok called The Chosen. If you want just the lifestyle of Orthodox Jews and Hasidic Jews, It's a wonderful book. It's a very famous story. It's a great piece of American literature, actually. It's called The Chosen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
You have a great day. I want to get Mary on. She's one of our regulars. Mary?
Good morning.
Yes, this is one of our regular callers.
I wanted to talk about, well, you're talking about pseudoscientific, then I have to say this. You quoted, Mr. Blevins, you quoted the second law of thermodynamics as saying matter can neither be created nor destroyed.
No, that's not the second law. He didn't mean that. If he said
I didn't say it was the second law. I said that is the law of physics.
No, I said that. I said that
okay. Well, you're wrong. You're wrong.
That's what it was in my chemistry book.
Oh, no, that's not right.
That's
the first law, but...
It's not because there's another part of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It says that matter can neither be created nor destroyed by ordinary means.
Oh, yeah.
That's the important part.
Yes, ma'am.
The Big Bang, it theoretically would not be ordinary means,
No. That's a good argument, and that's the typical... That is the standard argument of both philosophers, theistic philosophers, who are not necessarily particularly religious. We have a gentleman in our department at the Philosophy at the University of Texas named Coons, who basically makes this point. There are special things and there are normal things. And the Big Bang would be, or presumably something just before the Big Bang, would be a special thing.
Right.
Sure.
So
This is a legitimate philosophical argument, by the way. It's not some desperate attempt at creating theism from nothing. People actually think about the notion of special
But a lot of the confusion has come in because a lot of people leave off that last part.
I appreciate you pointing that out. Yes.
Well,
it's critical to the understanding of it. The second part of it is social Darwinism. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Sure.
Hobbes and Spencer and those guys in the survival of the fittest, that particular thing. They're applying evolution to a non-organic system. Okay? They're applying it to business competitiveness and that sort of thing. And it isn't really a valid theory in that respect, is because they are creating these enterprises.
Yeah, it has to be done extremely carefully. There's a certain amount of logic in the theory of the theory of evolution is brilliant for one particular reason. It shows people that you can make a scientific theory that doesn't look like Newtonian mechanics. And this is my friend Paul, who's a member of your organization, taught me this point. Newtonian mechanics is a rigorous mathematical structure that's elaborate and produces answers in numbers.
And it's fixed.
And what?
And it's fixed. It doesn't allow for chaos.
Well, no, that's incorrect. But the point is that technically that's not correct, ma'am. But the point is it's a good theory. It's a good physical theory. It gives us a lot of good answers. We put men on the moon, and we have spacecraft running around because of Newtonian mechanics. But the theory of evolution is not like that. It's a theory that's a very intellectual theory. It has to do with, it doesn't have numbers in it, and it doesn't have complicated models. But the point being that to apply that, you can apply some of that logic to the marketplace if you want, but you have to be very careful. You can never say that because of Darwin's theory of evolution, this will happen in the marketplace. That would be a very naive application of science.
I'd like to make one more comment.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Remember, the strict definition of evolution on its own, separate from biological evolution, would just be slow, gradual change. And I think people hear that, they'll say that term for the evolution of language or evolution of the marketplace, and then other people connect it with Darwinian evolution.
Well, yeah, evolution itself has the word evolution means that. I think when you're talking about Darwinian evolution, you mean more than just slow gradual change. You mean slow gradual change due to selective pressure. I think that that's an essential element of Darwinian evolution. And the evolution of language, you might be, you could say that any slow change is resulting of some kind of generalized notion of a force, of some kind of pressure.
I don't understand how a theory that applies to organic processes and genetic mutation can be applied to things that we create with our hands and with our minds.
Because the things we choose to create are created under pressure. It's not exactly applicable. I've already said that. Darwin's theory is not exactly transferable. However, when people make choices, they make choices because they're under pressure to make choices. And because of that, most people, that in itself is a force that causes change, and you could call that an evolutionary force. It's not a very big intellectual jump to do that, but certainly you're right. Darwin did not talk about economics.
I should say.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your call, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day, Mary. Yes. Let's go on to John.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
say I'm a Christian, but I still like to watch your show because I think you guys you bring up some interesting points.
Thank you.
And I have a question because I don't get to speak to atheists very often.
Okay.
And my first question is, so you don't believe in God, so does that mean that you also don't believe in the devil as well?
Correct.
So you believe none of them even exist?
Right. I have no beliefs on or about the supernatural.
Okay. A couple weeks ago on your program, you read a quote by James Traficant, the congressman from Ohio. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you were talking about how there's 7% of scientists and this and that don't believe in God or whatever.
Right. 93%, if I remember his quote.
Yeah. Right.
This is becoming an interesting topic now.
Okay, well, I found that interesting because you guys were laughing about it, that how silly it was, but I thought that he had a good question in the quote that you read, and that was that he said, well, how do you explain that we're here? Because, you yourself said that matter cannot be created or destroyed, and the fact that we're here just from a physical basis to me would mean that at one point, even if it was one subatomic particle that was massively blown apart, that creates why we're here today. Somebody had to create that one subatomic particle. It could not be just created by itself.
No.
And so so my question is, how do atheists, how do they explain that as part of as their belief system?
In my own personal, and atheists is such a broad group of people. I hate answering for every atheist out there, but so I answer for myself.
Okay.
If I answer that to where all matter has been and will always be here, it's always existed from infinity on, and we're just at the point where we can actually realize what that point of that matter is right now.
But somebody had to create it.
No, it's always here.
Okay, if you had a box, let's say you had a box that was with absolute vacuum, nothing in it.
Right. Yeah. No, I see. We see where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean.
But let's put it this way.
Okay.
The point he's making about matter is the point that you would inevitably make about God. If we would say that no, God, okay, very well, God made the particle, then who made God? And it's a very common and it's a very compelling argument. I mean, it's very. I mean, you eventually, if you think about this too much, you'll kind of get nauseous, right? I mean, and it's a very interesting discussion, and it's a heavy discussion in a philosophy called metaphysics, an academic philosophy called metaphysics, not a theological one. It's very interesting to theologians. I just was at a meeting with the Presbyterian Seminary earlier last week, where a physicist, a very famous physicist, who has become an Anglican priest, spoke specifically about these questions. And that's the first time I really realized that there is a very, very large group of very smart people who think about this question in a very formal and rigorous fashion. And some of them are atheists, and some of them are theists, and some of them are purely philosophers, and it's a very lively area of discussion. And it's the first time I realized that not every theologian is like Tex Mars, some kind of a doomsday prophet or doomsday preacher writing books for the public. So it's a very, very complicated question. And the thing that has to be careful for all people, Christians and non-Christians alike, is try not to be naive about just try not to be naive about your reading of the Bible. It's very unlikely that you alone, sitting down with the Bible, can come to a conclusion about this question when so many people have thought, from St. Thomas Aquinas to the current day, so many people have thought about these things. Now, the scientific argument, by the way, about the Big Bang is the following. The creation of matter and conservation of matter does not necessarily have to be violated because of what was called an initial quantum fluctuation. It's a very, very, very esoteric theory, and it's not easy to explain to people, and you have to be a specialist as a physicist to understand it.
Doesn't it go into 13-dimensional space?
Well, then there's these strings theories about it, but they're all very, very speculative. Yes. I've got to say, they're all extremely speculative. But the other interesting question is the following, is those of us, and I don't necessarily include myself among them, but those who believe that we live in a naturalistic world that is not controlled by supernatural forces could very well make an interesting argument as why should our brain be able to understand these questions at all? Our brain evolved for other reasons, reasons of survival. Our brain did not evolve necessarily for the purpose of understanding cosmology. It could very well be that these questions are not even possible with the human mind. There could be there's no reason to think there is not an upper limit of what the mind can conceive of. It's hard to believe because of all of our great successes, but it's not impossible to believe.
So you guys don't think that you have souls?
I don't. I'm not going to speak for
So you don't think that's why you inside yourself you can come up with those type of questions, is because that's actually your soul.
And that's a very good argument that philosophers make, is we would be unable to question unless we had certain supernatural forces.
I'll contend that it's just a vanity of the human nature that we would think that we had some reason for us being here. Why? I'm perfectly happy with there is no reason for us to be here. We are here, and that there is good enough for me. It's your own vanity that puts a reason behind that.
Well, I think the reason that we're here, I mean, that to me it is to help each other. You know, that's why God put us here, so that we could help each other while we were here on earth, and that's why I'm so much, you know, believe in the principles of Christianity and the way Jesus lived and all the things that he did believe in.
Now remember,
that's a great way to live your life, and if you live your whole life like that and help each other and treat each other with respect, that when you die, even if you die, the worst thing that can happen is that you've lived your good life. And the best side of it is, if there is a heaven and a good place to go to be in your God, well, then that's just even better. So that's how I live my life.
Thank you very much, caller.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I very much enjoy your program.
Yeah.
Boy, I hate ending on that. My point is, goes back to it's just a vanity of human nature that we feel that we are above everything else, and that we were put here by a God, and that we're different than the rest of the human species. I mean, the animal species that evolved here. And my contention is we're no different than them. We evolved from the same.
Now, as we go to our last caller here, notice that the last thing the caller said there was things that atheists struggle to get out. Atheist does not believe. I mean, just because you're an atheist, I know that you always make the contention that you're still a very moral individual.
Right.
And his last statement was, "God put us here to be good to our fellow man, to be good to," etc., etc., etc. That's still an atheist notion that is possible without theism.
That, yes.
Why don't we go to our last caller in our last few minutes?
This will be our last call here. We're down to 3 minutes.
Oh, I'd like to remind everybody that 11:30 at First Cafeteria at North Cross Mall is when we'll have the little slideshow and the discussion about the pseudoscientific cults, which you'll see. It's very safe, right? I'm extremely safe because of my definition. I have yet to be assaulted because I've included the wrong group.
All right, John, you're our last caller, John.
Hello. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, I just flipped here like 10 minutes ago. I think you've put up some really interesting points.
Thank you.
And you don't believe in God or the devil, is that correct?
Correct. Or angels or souls. I don't believe there's anything such as
Are y'all familiar with the theory of intelligent design?
Yes. Very familiar. I'm actually very interested in that theory yes.
But,
would you like to comment on it, or do you want...
Yeah, because it's like the theory, for those who might not know, it's the theory that because life in itself is so complex.
It's the anthropic principle, yes.
Yeah, it couldn't have.
But my answer to that is you can show order. And just because you show order does not mean it's design. Those are, you run into something we discussed this whole show is definition.
Yeah.
Order does not mean design.
Let me tell the caller the following thing. I'll encourage Ray to bring on as a guest a member of his own group, Paul.
I'd love to, yes.
What's Paul's last name? I forgot off the top of my head. I'm sorry, Paul, if you're watching.
Yes.
Paul is an expert on the notion of intelligent design and the anthropic principle. Actually, I consider myself very, very well informed on the subject as well. It's a very interesting subject, and that seminary meeting I went to was just about that topic. Please tune in later when Paul discusses it. It's a very complicated issue, and it's very, very interesting. We don't have time in 2 minutes to go into the details of it, I'm afraid. But it's not a knockdown argument, is what I'd like to mention. It's not a foolproof knockdown argument. It's a very interesting and very fascinating argument from a perspective of physics, because so much wonderful physics, as I'm sure the caller would go into if he had a moment, goes into it, the fundamental constants, the age of the universe, the length of age of stars. But notice that, by the way, that I just want to make the point, if you're a creationist out there and you're going to intelligent design to support your position, you are by definition not a young earther. And I think that's a big improvement. I'd rather see every creationist be an intelligent design creationist than a young earth creationist, or a scientific creationist, they call them. If you're an intelligent design creationist, you have a lot more grounds to reconcile yourself with science. In fact, intelligent design creationists worship science. And that's very interesting.
All right, John, I'm sorry I have to cut you off. We're running out of time.
Good day to you.
Good day to you, too. And, everyone, we are on every Sunday here, 9 a.m., Channel 16. We'll be back next Sunday. I'd like to thank Rohan.
Oh, my pleasure. See you at 11:30.
Yes, we're going to Furs, North Cross Mall as soon as we leave out of here. Very intelligent presentation there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what more you have there.
Sure.
Where you
it's actually going to be brain candy, is what.
There you go. Excellent definition there. We love you, Austin. We love all the Christians out there. We love hearing from you. We love the fact that they're out there on Sunday morning instead of going to church. They're over there calling us and trying to convert us, I guess. And didn't get my usual prayer. I usually have somebody calling and saying they're praying for me every week.
I see.
So I didn't get it in my prayer calls this week. So really, I'm just killing up the last few seconds here at the time.
Yeah.
You say anything you want?
Just 11:30 at North Cross Mall, and also always ask the intelligent question.